The blood-bay stallion reared up with such violence that his hooves seemed to claw at the clouds themselves, and every man at the corral fence held his breath except for the woman who stood perfectly still in the center of the pen, her voice barely above a whisper as she sang something none of them could quite hear. Ryland Lawrence had never seen anything like it in his 26 years of working cattle and breaking horses across 3 territories. He had arrived in Downeyville, California just 2 weeks earlier in the summer of 1878, following a cattle drive that had left him bone-tired and ready for steadier work. The Sierra Nevada foothills rose majestically around the mining town, and though the gold rush days had faded, the town still bustled with ranchers, merchants, and those seeking their fortunes in less glittering but more reliable ways. The woman in the corral wore practical split riding skirts and a simple cotton blouse with the sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her dark hair was braided down her back, and even from where Ryland stood, he could see the complete absence of fear in her posture. The stallion came down hard, snorting and tossing his magnificent head, but she simply turned slightly, angling her body away from him in a movement so subtle it seemed like barely a shift in the dust. "That is Penelope Zimmerman," said the ranch foreman, a grizzled man named Dutch who had hired Ryland on for the summer season at the Double Creek Ranch. Best horsebreaker in 3 counties, though half the men refused to admit it. Ryland watched as Penelope took a single step backward, her hands loose at her sides. The stallion tracked her movement, ears flicking forward with curiosity replacing the wild panic in his eyes. She waited, patient as the mountains themselves, and then the horse took one tentative step toward her. "How long has she been at it?" Ryland asked quietly, afraid to break whatever spell was being woven in that dusty circle. "About 20 minutes with this one. Some take hours, some take days, but I have never seen her fail, and I have never seen her use whip or cruel words." Dutch spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Her father taught her before he passed 5 years back. Old Samuel Zimmerman had a way with animals that seemed almost supernatural, and he passed every bit of it to his only child. The stallion took another step, and then another. Penelope remained utterly still until the horse's nose was nearly touching her shoulder. Then she exhaled softly and raised one hand with aching slowness to touch the white blaze on his forehead. The great animal trembled but did not pull away. Ryland felt something tighten in his chest that had nothing to do with the impressive display of horsemanship and everything to do with the woman herself. There was a grace to her that reminded him of the prairie grass bending in wind, strong and flexible and somehow eternal. "We lost 3 men trying to break that stallion," Dutch continued. "One of them ended up with a broken arm and cracked ribs. The owner was about ready to sell him off or shoot him before Miss Zimmerman offered to take him on." "She does this for the ranch?" "She does it for anyone who asks and can pay her fee, lives on a small property about 2 miles out of town with her mother and younger brother, takes in the difficult horses, the ones other people have given up on, and turns them into solid mounts. Never loses her temper, never raises her voice, never breaks their spirit." Dutch glanced at Ryland with a knowing look. "You are staring something fierce, Lawrence." Ryland felt heat creep up his neck, but could not look away as Penelope ran her hand down the stallion's neck, still murmuring words too soft to hear. "I have never seen a horse gentled that way. Every breaking I have witnessed involved ropes and struggle, and forcing the animal into submission." "That is because you have been learning from men," Dutch said, "and men tend to think everything needs to be conquered. Miss Zimmerman believes in partnership, says a horse that trusts you will carry you through hell itself, but a horse that fears you will throw you first chance it gets." The stallion lowered his head, and Penelope scratched behind his ears with the casual affection one might show a loyal dog. Then she turned and walked away from him toward the gate. The horse followed her like he had been doing it his entire life. When Penelope emerged from the corral, Ryland got his first clear look at her face. She was perhaps 23 or 24, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of honey in sunlight. Dirt streaked one cheek, and perspiration dampened the hair at her temples, but Ryland thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "Dutch," she said, her voice warm and slightly husky from the dust. He will need another few sessions, but the worst is past. Someone hurt him badly, used spurs on him too hard, and probably beat him. It will take time to convince him that not all humans are cruel. You have already worked a miracle, Miss Zimmerman. The owner will be mighty pleased. Dutch counted out coins from his pocket and placed them in her palm. Will you be at the barn tomorrow morning? I will be here at dawn. She tucked the money into a leather pouch at her belt and finally looked at Ryland. Her gaze was direct and assessing, neither flirtatious nor hostile, simply taking his measure the way she might evaluate a horse. You are new. Ryland Lawrence, madam. He pulled his hat from his head. I signed on with the ranch 2 weeks back. That was the finest piece of horsework I have ever witnessed. Something flickered in her expression, surprise perhaps at the genuine admiration in his voice. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Most men tell me I am too soft, that I waste time when force would be faster. Force might be faster, but I imagine your way lasts longer. Ryland turned his hat in his hands, suddenly aware of how tall she was, only a few inches shorter than his own 6 feet. I have been breaking horses since I was 15 years old, and I thought I knew what I was doing. But watching you just now, I realized I have been doing it all wrong. Penelope studied him for a long moment, and Ryland felt like she could see straight through to his bones. Then a small smile curved her lips. Wrong is a harsh word. Different, perhaps, but there is always room to learn new ways. Would you teach me? The words came out before he could think better of them. I mean, would you be willing to show me your methods? I would pay you for your time, naturally. Dutch made a noise that might have been a laugh or a cough. Penelope raised one eyebrow, her expression thoughtful. You want to learn gentling from me? I do. I spent 10 years thinking I was good at this work, but what I saw today showed me there is a whole different way of understanding horses that I have been missing. Ryland met her eyes steadily. I am not too proud to admit when someone knows more than I do, and I would like to be better at my trade. She was quiet for so long that Ryland thought she would refuse. Then she nodded once, decisively. I have a 3-year-old mare at my place that needs work. If you come by tomorrow evening after your ranch duties, you can observe. If you prove you have the patience for it, then maybe I will let you try your hand under my supervision. I will be there. Where exactly is your property? Take the north road out of town past the Miller farm. You will see a white house with a red barn. That is the Zimmerman place. She glanced at the sky, calculating the hour by the sun's position. I need to get back. My brother will be wondering where I am. Ryland watched her walk to where a sturdy paint mare stood, ground tied near the fence. Penelope swung into the saddle with an easy motion and touched the brim of her hat in farewell before turning the horse toward the road. Well, Dutch said, chewing thoughtfully on his tobacco. That is interesting. What is? She usually does not take on students. Had a few men ask over the years, but she always turned them down. Said they were more interested in proving her methods did not work than in actually learning. Dutch clapped Ryland on the shoulder. Must have seen something in you she liked. Ryland settled his hat back on his head and tried to ignore the flutter of anticipation in his chest. I just want to learn. Sure you do. Dutch's grin was knowing. Come on, those stalls are not going to muck themselves, and you have got regular work to finish before you go courting horse trainers tomorrow evening. I am not courting anyone. I am learning a trade skill. Dutch just laughed and walked away, leaving Ryland standing in the dust, already counting the hours until the next evening. The rest of that day and all of the next seemed to crawl by with agonizing slowness. Ryland threw himself into his work, mending fences and moving cattle and doing all the 100 small tasks that ranch life demanded. His hands stayed busy, but his mind kept drifting to the woman in the corral, to the way she had stood so fearlessly before that massive stallion, to the gentleness in her voice and the strength in her patience. He knew he was being foolish. He had known Penelope Zimmerman for all of 5 minutes, exchanged perhaps a dozen sentences with her, and yet he could not stop thinking about her. It was not just her beauty, though she was certainly lovely. It was something deeper, something in the way she moved through the world with quiet confidence and compassion. By the time his duties ended the following afternoon, Ryland had washed up twice and changed his shirt 3 times before settling on a clean blue one that his sister had sent him last Christmas. He borrowed Dutch's spare horse, a dependable gelding named Chester, and set out on the north road as the sun began its slow descent toward the mountains. The Zimmerman property was easy to spot, exactly as Penelope had described. The White House was small but well-maintained, with a garden out front bursting with vegetables and flowers. The red barn stood behind it, larger than Ryland had expected, with several paddocks spreading out from it in neat rectangles. He could see horses in 2 of the enclosures and smoke rising from the house's chimney. As he rode up the drive, a boy of perhaps 13 came out of the barn, wiping his hands on his trousers. He had the same dark hair as Penelope and the same direct way of looking at a person. "You must be the cowboy Penny said might come by," the boy said. "I am Patrick Zimmerman. You can tie your horse there." He pointed to a hitching post near the barn. "Ryland Lawrence, pleased to meet you, Patrick." Ryland dismounted and secured Chester's reins. "Your sister around?" "In the back paddock with Daisy. That is the mare she mentioned." Patrick fell into step beside him as they walked around the barn. "Fair warning. Penny takes her horsework seriously. If you waste her time or show disrespect to the animals, she will send you packing regardless of any agreement." "I will keep that in mind." They rounded the corner, and Ryland saw Penelope in a round pen similar to the one at the Double Creek Ranch. A lovely chestnut mare with 4 white socks stood in the center, head high and eyes rolling white with nervousness. Penelope stood near the fence, not looking directly at the horse, her posture relaxed. She glanced over when she heard their footsteps and raised a hand in greeting. "Mr. Lawrence, you are punctual. That is a good sign." "I am a man of my word, Miss Zimmerman." "Penny, please, if we are going to work together, we might as well dispense with excessive formality." She turned her attention back to the mare. "This is Daisy. She was kept in a stall too small for her for the first 2 years of her life, barely handled except to be fed. The man who owned her did not believe in working with horses until they were fully grown, did not understand that young horses need socialization and gentle handling. By the time he tried to halt or break her, she was terrified of human contact." Ryland watched the mare carefully. She was trembling, every muscle tense and ready for flight. "How long have you had her?" 3 days. I have been spending an hour morning and evening just standing in her space, letting her get used to my presence. Yesterday, she took hay from my hand for the first time." Penny's voice was soft with pride. "Today I hope to touch her neck." "That seems like slow progress for 3 days of work." "Speed is not the goal. Trust is." Penny began to hum, a low melodic sound that seemed to blend with the evening breeze. "Watch her ears." Ryland focused on the mare's ears. They were pinned back against her skull in fear and aggression, but as Penny continued to hum, they slowly began to swivel forward, tracking the sound. "Fear makes an animal's world very small," Penny said quietly. "Everything becomes a potential threat. The key is to make yourself the least threatening thing in their environment. Not predator, not competitor, just a part of the landscape that happens to make interesting sounds." She took a single step forward, still humming. The mare snorted and shifted, but did not bolt. Penny waited, patient as stone, for several long minutes. Then she took another small step. "This could take all night," Ryland observed. "Then it takes all night. The moment I rush is the moment I lose her trust." Penny glanced at him. "That is the first lesson. If you cannot master patience, you cannot master this method. Horses live in the present moment. They do not understand human schedules or impatience. They only understand what they feel right now, and if they feel pressured or frightened, they will resist." Ryland nodded slowly, filing the information away. He had never thought about horses that way before, had always approached them as animals to be trained to human needs and timelines. The idea of working on their schedule within their emotional framework was entirely foreign to everything he had been taught. Penny took another step, and another. The mare watched her approach with obvious anxiety, but something in Penny's demeanor, the calmness radiating from her, seemed to keep the horse from panicking. When Penny was about 10 feet away, she stopped and slowly lowered herself to sit cross-legged in the dust. "What are you doing?" Ryland whispered, making myself smaller, less threatening. Penny continued her soft humming. "Predators stand tall. Prey animals crouch. By lowering my height, I signal to her that I'm not hunting her." The mare's ears flicked forward with more interest now. She took a tentative step toward Penny, then another. Ryland held his breath, afraid to move or make a sound that might shatter this delicate moment. Slowly, with infinite caution, the mare stretched her neck out until her nose was inches from Penny's head. Ryland saw the horse's nostrils flare as she took in Penny's scent. Then, wonder of wonders, the mare lowered her head and gently nuzzled Penny's hair. Penny remained perfectly still for a long moment, letting the horse investigate her. Then she raised one hand with excruciating slowness and touched the mare's soft nose with just her fingertips. The mare startled slightly but did not flee. Penny kept her hand there, barely making contact, for several seconds before withdrawing it and standing up in a smooth, unhurried motion. She walked to the fence without looking back at the horse, and Ryland saw the bright shine of satisfaction in her eyes. "That is a significant breakthrough," she said, opening the gate and slipping through. "Tomorrow she will remember that touch did not hurt, and we can build from there." "That was incredible," Ryland said honestly. "I've never seen anything like it." "It is not magic, just observation and patience." Penny latched the gate and wiped dust from her skirts. "Did you watch carefully? Did you see how I read her body language, how I adjusted my own behavior to match what she could handle?" "I saw, though I'm not sure I understood all of it." "That is what the learning is for." Penny started walking toward the house, and Ryland fell into step beside her. Horse breaking, the traditional way, is about imposing human will on the animal. What I do is about creating a relationship built on mutual respect. It takes longer, but the result is a horse that works with you instead of simply obeying out of fear. Patrick had disappeared into the barn to handle evening chores. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the air was cooling rapidly as it always did in the mountains. Ryland could smell something cooking from inside the house, something that made his stomach remind him he had not eaten since noon. "Will you stay for supper?" Penny asked, as if reading his thoughts. "My mother always makes too much, and you rode all the way out here. It seems only fair to feed you." "I would not want to impose. It is not an imposition if I am offering." She smiled at him, and Ryland felt that tightening in his chest again. "Besides, we can talk more about the training methods over food. I find it easier to explain when I'm not trying to watch a horse at the same time." The Zimmerman house was warm and welcoming, filled with the comfortable clutter of a family home. Penny's mother, Margaret, was a stout woman with iron gray hair and kind eyes who greeted Ryland with genuine warmth. The table was set for 4, and the food was simple but plentiful: roasted chicken, boiled potatoes, fresh bread, and green beans from the garden. "So you are the cowboy who wants to learn my daughter's ways," Margaret said, as she passed Ryland the potatoes. "That is refreshing. Most men around here think Penny is wasting her time with all her gentle methods." "Most men around here have egos more fragile than eggshells," Penny said dryly. "They cannot stand the idea that a woman might know more about horses than they do." "To be fair," Patrick interjected, "Jim Morrison is not wrong that your way takes longer. He can break a horse in 3 days." "He can break a horse's spirit in 3 days," Penny corrected. "That is not the same thing. I have seen Jim Morrison's horses. They obey, yes, but they have no joy in their work. They are simply afraid of what will happen if they do not comply." Ryland swallowed a bite of chicken and said, "I have used Morrison's methods myself, or one similar to them. That is how I learned. But watching you work, I realized there might be a better way, not just for the horses, but for the riders too. A horse that trusts you is safer to ride than one that simply fears you." Margaret beamed at him. A man who can admit he might be wrong and seek to learn better. Ryland Lawrence, you are a rare breed. The meal passed in comfortable conversation, and Ryland found himself relaxing in a way he had not since arriving in Downeyville. The Zimmermans were easy people to be around, their affection for each other obvious in the way they talked and joked and shared food. It reminded him of his own family back in Wyoming, and a pang of homesickness caught him unexpectedly. After supper, Penny walked with him back to where Chester stood patiently waiting. The stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, brilliant and countless in a way they never seemed to be near towns or cities. "You did well today," Penny said. "Mostly you stayed quiet and observed, which is exactly what I needed you to do. If you want to continue, come back tomorrow evening. I will be working with Daisy again, and also with a young gelding that needs confidence building. I will be here." Ryland untied Chester's reins, but hesitated before mounting. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask. I may not answer." "Why did you say yes to teaching me? Your brother mentioned you have turned down others." Penny looked up at the emerging stars, considering her response. "Because when you asked, you did not try to flatter me or imply that you could do it better if I would just explain my secrets. You simply admitted you did not know something and wanted to learn. That kind of humility is rare, especially in men who work with animals. I thought you might actually listen instead of just waiting for your turn to talk." "I will listen," Ryland promised. "I meant what I said. I want to be better at this." "Then we will see what we can make of you." Her smile was warm in the twilight. "Ride safe, Ryland Lawrence." He mounted Chester and turned the horse toward the road, glancing back once to see Penny still standing by the barn, a slender figure against the darkening landscape. Something told him his life had just taken a turn towards something unexpected and possibly wonderful, and the thought both thrilled and terrified him. Over the following weeks, Ryland fell into a new rhythm. His days belonged to the Double Creek Ranch, working cattle and mending fence and doing all the tasks that needed doing. But his evenings belonged to the Zimmerman farm, to learning a new way of understanding the animals he had worked with his entire adult life. Penny proved to be a patient but exacting teacher. She made him practice standing still for an hour at a time, learning to quiet his own energy and become a peaceful presence. She taught him to read the subtle signals horses gave with their ears, their tails, the tension in their muscles. She showed him how to use his voice as a tool for calming rather than commanding, how to move in ways that communicated safety rather than threat. "Everything you do sends a message," she explained one evening, as they worked with a skittish gelding named Thunder. "The way you walk, the way you breathe, where you look, how fast you move. Horses are prey animals. They are hardwired to notice threats. If you move like a predator, quick and direct, they will respond with fear. If you move like another herbivore, calm and indirect, they will see you as part of their herd." Ryland tried to walk the way Penny did, with that fluid grace that seemed to calm horses just by existing near them. It felt awkward and unnatural at first, every instinct telling him to approach the animals head-on and take control. But gradually, with practice and Penny's endless corrections, he began to understand the difference. "Better," she said, watching him work. "Your shoulders are still too tense, though. You are thinking too hard. Horses respond to emotion and energy more than conscious thought. You need to feel calm, not just act calm." "How do I do that?" "By actually being calm, by trusting the process and letting go of the need to control everything." She stepped into the pen beside him, and her presence immediately changed Thunder's demeanor. The gelding's head lowered, his eyes softened. "See? He knows I'm not here to force anything. I am just here, sharing space with him, and he can decide how he wants to interact." Thunder walked over to Penny and lipped at her sleeve, and she scratched his forehead affectionately. The whole thing looked so easy, so natural, and Ryland felt a surge of frustration that he was struggling so much with something that seemed to come as naturally to Penny as breathing. She must have seen something in his expression because she said gently, "You are doing fine. This is a complete shift in how you think about animals. It takes time to unlearn old patterns and build new ones. Be patient with yourself the way you are learning to be patient with the horses. As the days stretched into weeks, Ryland found himself looking forward to those evening sessions with an intensity that had little to do with horsemanship and everything to do with the woman teaching him. He loved watching Penny work, loved the quiet confidence she brought to every interaction, loved the way she spoke about animals as individuals with their own personalities and needs. He loved, too, the moments between the lessons when they would stand by the fence and talk as the sun set. She told him about growing up on the farm, about learning from her father who had believed that gentleness was strength, not weakness. She spoke about the challenges of being a woman in a profession dominated by men, about proving herself over and over to people who assumed she did not know what she was doing. "Does it ever make you angry?" Ryland asked one evening. "Having to constantly demonstrate your competence to people who would accept it without question if you were a man?" Penny shrugged. Angry, frustrated, exhausted, all of those at various times. But I also know that I am good at what I do, and eventually the results speak for themselves. The stallion I was working with when you first arrived? His owner offered me double my fee after 1 week because he could not believe the change in the animal. Word spreads. People talk. Slowly, I am building a reputation that cannot be dismissed. "You have already built it," Ryland said. "Dutch told me you are the best horsebreaker in 3 counties. Dutch is biased because I saved his favorite mare after she foundered last year." But Penny smiled, pleased by the compliment. "Still, I appreciate the sentiment." They were standing close together, close enough that Ryland could catch the scent of hay and leather and something floral that might have been soap or might have just been Penny herself. He wanted to reach out and touch her hand, wanted to say something about how much these evenings meant to him, but he held back. She was his teacher, and he did not want to presume or make her uncomfortable. But then Penny turned to look at him, and there was something in her eyes that made his heart stutter. "You have learned more in 3 weeks than most men learn in 3 years, she said softly. "You have a gift for this, Ryland. A real gift. You just needed someone to show you a different way of seeing. You are a good teacher, and you are a good student." Her hand brushed against his, whether accidentally or intentionally he could not tell. "I am glad you asked to learn from me." "So am I." The words came out rougher than he intended, full of emotion he had not meant to reveal. "These evenings working with you, learning from you, they have become the best part of my days." Penny's breath caught slightly, and Ryland knew she understood he was not just talking about horse training. The air between them felt charged, full of possibility and risk, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Patrick's voice called from the barn, something about needing help with a stuck gate, and the moment shattered like dropped glass. Penny stepped back, her expression flustered in a way he had never seen before. "I should go help him," she said. "Of course." She hurried away, and Ryland leaned against the fence, his heart pounding. He had not imagined that moment, the connection that had hummed between them. Penny had felt it too. The question was what either of them planned to do about it. 2 days later, Ryland arrived at the farm to find Penny in the round pen with a new horse, a massive bay with a wild eye and aggressive posture. As he approached, the horse charged at Penny, teeth bared, and Ryland's heart leaped into his throat. But Penny simply turned her shoulder and stepped aside, moving out of the horse's path without panic or rush. The bay thundered past her and spun at the fence, snorting challenges. "That is Goliath," Patrick said from beside Ryland. He had appeared silently, the way he often did. "Came in yesterday. Owner said he has tried to kill 3 different trainers. Wanted Penny to put him down humanely since he's too dangerous to keep and too beautiful to just shoot in a field somewhere." And Penny said no. Penny always says no to giving up on them. Patrick's young face was worried. "But this one scares me. He is not just frightened like the others. He is angry." Ryland watched as Goliath charged again, and again Penny avoided him with minimal movement. She did not run, did not shout, did not raise her hands to protect herself. She simply existed in the space, refusing to engage with the horse's aggression. She should not be in there alone, Ryland said. Try telling her that. She says having another person would escalate things, make Goliath feel more trapped and defensive. Patrick kicked at the dirt. I hate when she takes on horses like this. Father used to do it too, work with the truly dangerous ones, and it always terrified Mother and me. The charge and retreat pattern continued for 20 minutes. Goliath would rush at Penny, and she would calmly step aside. He would rear and strike with his hooves, and she would move out of range. Gradually, Ryland began to see what she was doing. She was refusing to be either a threat or a victim, refusing to play the game Goliath wanted to play. She was simply present, neutral, offering neither fight nor flight. Finally, the big bay stood in the center of the pen, sides heaving, head still high, but ears flicking forward with confusion. Penny had moved to the fence and stood there, not looking at him, as calm as if she were waiting for a stagecoach. Goliath took a tentative step toward her, then another. His ears were fully forward now, his aggression replaced by curiosity. What was this human who refused to fight or flee? What did her behavior mean? Penny began to hum, that low, melodic sound Ryland had heard her use many times before. Goliath's head lowered slightly, listening. He took another step and another, until he stood just a few feet from Penny's back. Then Penny did something Ryland had never seen her do. She turned and looked directly at the horse, meeting his eyes with complete calm and no fear at all. For a long moment, woman and horse stared at each other. Then Goliath lowered his head in what looked unmistakably like a bow of respect. Penny reached out slowly and touched his forehead, and the great aggressive bay stood perfectly still and accepted her touch. When she emerged from the pen 15 minutes later, Ryland was there to meet her, his heart still pounding with residual fear. That was incredibly dangerous, he said, unable to keep the worry from his voice. That was necessary, Penny countered. Goliath needed to learn that aggression would not work on me, that I would not give him the fight or the fear he was expecting. Now he knows, and we can start building trust. You could have been killed. I could be killed crossing the street in town if a wagon lost control. Life is full of risks, Ryland. But her expression softened when she saw his face. I do appreciate your concern. It is nice to know someone worries. Of course I worry. The words burst out of him. Penny, I worry about you constantly. I think about you all day while I'm working. I count the hours until I can see you again. These past weeks have been the best of my life, and not just because I'm learning about horses. Penny's eyes widened, and a flush crept up her cheeks. Ryland, I know this might be inappropriate. I know I'm your student, and I should not be saying these things, but watching you in that pen just now, thinking about what could have happened, I realized I cannot keep pretending this is just about horse training for me anymore. He took a breath, steadying himself. I have feelings for you, Penny. Deep feelings. And if that makes you uncomfortable or means I can no longer study with you, then I will accept that. But I needed you to know. For a long moment, she just looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then she glanced around, noting Patrick in the barn and the open space where anyone could see them. Walk with me, she said quietly. She led him behind the barn to a small grove of cottonwood trees that provided shade and privacy. When they were out of sight of the house and barn, she turned to face him. I've been trying very hard not to develop feelings for you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I told myself you were a student, that it would be unprofessional, that I did not need the complication. But the truth is, I have been failing at that endeavor quite spectacularly. Hope flared in Ryland's chest. You have feelings for me too? I have been looking forward to your visits more than I should. I have been finding excuses to stand close to you, to touch your hand when correcting your position, to stay later talking when I should have sent you home. She looked up at him, and her honey-colored eyes were full of vulnerability. I like you, Ryland Lawrence, more than I have liked anyone in a very long time, and that terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Because everyone I have let close has either left or died. My father taught me everything I know. And then a bad fall from a horse killed him 5 years ago. I had a beau once, a man I thought I might marry, but he decided he could not stand being with a woman who was better with horses than he was. People leave, or they are taken away, and it hurts every single time. Ryland reached out slowly and took her hand, half expecting her to pull away. But she did not. Her fingers tightened around his, holding on like he was an anchor in rough seas. I cannot promise I will never leave or that nothing bad will ever happen, he said honestly. Life does not work that way, but I can promise that I am here now, that my feelings are genuine, and that I would like very much to see where this could go between us if you are willing to take that risk. Penny studied him for a long moment, searching his face for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. I would like that too, but we take this slowly, yes? I need time to trust this, to trust you. As slow as you need. I learned patience from a very wise teacher. He smiled, trying to lighten the intensity of the moment. We will go at your pace, just like gentling a skittish horse. She laughed at that, a sound of genuine amusement. Did you just compare courting me to training a horse? Is it working? Unfortunately, yes. She was still holding his hand, and now she stepped closer, rising on her toes to press a quick, soft kiss to his cheek. Thank you for your honesty, and for being willing to move slowly. That means more to me than you know. Ryland felt like he could float back to town. That brief kiss, barely more than a brush of lips against skin, had set every nerve in his body alight. But he forced himself to remain calm, to respect the boundaries she had just established. Should we head back? Patrick is probably wondering where we disappeared to. Patrick already knows I like you. He's been teasing me about it for weeks. Penny started walking back toward the barn, still holding Ryland's hand. My brother is irritatingly perceptive for a 13-year-old. What about your mother? Mother has been praying for me to find a good man since my last beau proved himself to be an insecure fool. She will probably start planning a wedding the moment she realizes we are courting. Penny squeezed his hand. Fair warning. Margaret Zimmerman has very strong opinions about appropriate wedding decorations. We have been courting for approximately 3 minutes, and you are already warning me about wedding planning? I believe in being honest about what you're getting into. But her smile was teasing, and Ryland felt that warmth in his chest expand until it filled his entire body. The following weeks took on a new sweetness. Ryland still came to the farm every evening for lessons, but now there were also stolen moments of hand-holding, conversations that stretched late into the night, walks through the property where they talked about everything from philosophy to favorite childhood memories. Penny opened up slowly, revealing layers of herself that she clearly did not show to many people, and Ryland treasured every new thing he learned about her. He learned that she was afraid of deep water because she had nearly drowned in a river as a child. He learned that she could play the fiddle beautifully, but rarely did because it made her miss her father too much. He learned that she wanted to travel someday to see the ocean and visit big cities, but felt trapped by responsibility to her family and the horses that needed her. In turn, he told her about growing up in Wyoming, the youngest of 4 children and the only boy. He told her about his father's death in a mining accident when Ryland was 12, about having to grow up fast to help support the family. He told her about his love of open spaces and his restlessness, the way he had drifted from job to job and town to town, always looking for something he could not quite name. Maybe you were looking for a place to belong, Penny suggested one evening as they sat on the porch steps of her house, watching the sun set over the mountains. A purpose beyond just survival. Maybe I was looking for you, Ryland said, then immediately felt foolish for such a romantic sentiment. But Penny did not laugh. Instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder and said softly, Maybe you were, and maybe I was waiting for you without knowing it. Margaret Zimmerman proved to be exactly as enthusiastic as Penny had warned. The moment she understood that Ryland and her daughter were courting officially, she began inviting him to family dinners several times a week and treating him like he was already part of the family. Patrick, for his part, seemed pleased by the development and occasionally gave Ryland knowing looks when he thought Penny was not paying attention. The work with horses continued, and Ryland found himself growing more confident in the techniques Penny had taught him. Dutch noticed the change in his approach and started assigning him some of the younger, more skittish horses at the Double Creek Ranch. Ryland used Penny's methods, and the results were undeniable. The horses responded better, learned faster, and showed none of the fear-based resistance he had seen with traditional breaking methods. "You have been spending a lot of time with Miss Zimmerman," Dutch observed one afternoon as Ryland successfully worked with a nervous filly. "Learning a lot more than just horse training, I would wager." "She is an exceptional woman," Ryland said simply. "That she is." "And you are a good man, Lawrence. You treat her with respect. Treat her skills with respect. That matters to folks around here." Dutch paused, then added, "Her father was a good friend of mine. Samuel would have liked you, I think. Would have appreciated you learning his methods instead of dismissing them." The comment meant more to Ryland than he could express. He knew how much Penny had loved her father, knew how much his legacy meant to her. To be told that he was carrying on that legacy in some small way felt like a tremendous honor. By the time summer began fading toward autumn, Ryland knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Penny Zimmerman. It was not a slow realization or a gradual dawning. It was simply a fact, as undeniable as the mountains or the sky. She challenged him, inspired him, made him want to be better in every possible way. When he was with her, the restlessness that had always driven him from place to place finally quieted. He had found what he had been searching for. The question was how and when to ask her to marry him. They had only been officially courting for 2 months, and Penny had asked for slow. But 2 months of seeing someone every single day, of sharing thoughts and dreams and fears, of building something solid and real together, felt like far longer, and Ryland was not getting any younger. At 26, he was ready to settle down, to build a life with someone. He sought advice from Dutch, who suggested simply asking straightforwardly. "Miss Zimmerman is not the type for elaborate romantic gestures," the foreman said. "She values honesty and directness. Tell her how you feel and what you want, and let her decide." So on a cool September evening, after they had finished working with Goliath, who was now gentle as a kitten and ready to return to his grateful owner, Ryland asked Penny to walk with him to the cottonwood grove. "This sounds serious," she said, but she was smiling. "It is serious." Ryland stopped in the shade of the largest tree and took both her hands in his. "Penny, I know we have only been courting officially for a couple of months. I know you asked me to go slowly, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of my feelings for you." Her eyes widened slightly, and he saw her realize where this was heading. "I love you," he continued. "I love your strength and your compassion and your brilliant mind. I love the way you see the world, the way you treat every living thing with respect and kindness. I love how patient you are, how dedicated, how absolutely fearless in the face of challenges. You have made me a better man, a better horseman, a better person in every way." "Ryland," she whispered, "I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up every morning knowing I get to work beside you, learn from you, support your dreams the way you have supported mine. I want to help you expand your horse training business. Maybe even travel with you to see that ocean you have always wanted to visit. I want everything, Penny, every possible future that includes you." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Penny just stared at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Then she threw her arms around his neck and said, "Yes, yes, absolutely, yes." Ryland caught her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, she was crying and smiling simultaneously, and he thought she had never looked more beautiful. "I love you too," she said, cupping his face in her hands. "I have been trying not to say it, trying to be cautious. But I have loved you for weeks now. Maybe from the very beginning, from the moment you asked me to teach you with such genuine humility. You saw me, really saw me, not as a woman trying to do man's work, but as a skilled professional worth learning from. Do you know how rare that is? You deserve to be seen exactly as you are, brilliant and talented and extraordinary. He kissed her then properly, a kiss full of promise and passion and all the feelings he had been holding back. She kissed him back with equal fervor, and when they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. "We should tell my family," Penny said, laughing a little at the dazed expression on Ryland's face. "Mother is going to lose her mind with excitement." Margaret did indeed lose her mind with excitement, bursting into tears of joy and immediately pulling out paper to start making lists of everything that would need to be done. Patrick congratulated them both with genuine warmth, then asked if this meant Ryland would be moving into the farm permanently. "We have not discussed logistics yet," Ryland admitted. "I still work for the Double Creek Ranch." "You should quit and work here full-time," Patrick said. "We could use the help, and you and Penny could build the horse training business together. Father always dreamed of expanding, of training other people in his methods so they could spread further. You could do that." Ryland looked at Penny, who seemed thoughtful. "It is not a bad idea," she said slowly. "We would need to save money and plan carefully, but with both of us working together, we could take on more horses, maybe even start holding workshops. There is a real need for these training methods, and we could fill it." "Then that is what we will do." Ryland felt excitement building in his chest. "I will give Dutch proper notice, help him find a replacement, and then I will be here working with you, building something that matters." They set the wedding date for November, giving them 2 months to prepare. Margaret threw herself into planning with the enthusiasm Penny had predicted, and Ryland found himself swept up in discussions of flowers and food and guest lists. He did not mind, though. Every detail was another piece of the life they were building together, and he treasured all of it. Dutch took the news of Ryland's resignation with good humor. "Figured it was coming," he said. "You have been useless around here anyway, mooning over Miss Zimmerman constantly. Go build your life with her. But you let me know if you need help getting established, you hear? Samuel was a good friend, and I would be honored to support you carrying on his legacy." True to his word, Dutch showed up at the Zimmerman farm 2 weeks later with a crew of ranch hands and a wagon full of lumber. "Figured you would need a bigger barn if you're planning to expand the horse business," he said gruffly. "Consider this my wedding gift." Ryland was overwhelmed by the generosity, and Penny actually cried. Over the course of a long weekend, the Double Creek Ranch hands worked alongside Ryland, Patrick, and several other community members to build a second barn, larger than the first, with 8 roomy stalls and a tack room. It was a gesture of support and acceptance that spoke volumes about how the community viewed both Penny and Ryland. The wedding took place on a crisp November morning at the small church in Downeyville. The building was packed with friends and neighbors, ranchers and townsfolk who had come to celebrate the union. Penny wore a simple white dress that her mother had sewn, with wildflowers in her hair, and Ryland thought she looked like something from a dream. They spoke their vows before God and community, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, Ryland kissed his bride and felt like the luckiest man in all of California. The celebration afterward was held at the Zimmerman farm, with tables set up in the yard and food and drink provided by what seemed like half the county. People danced and laughed and shared stories, and Ryland was struck by how many lives Penny had touched with her work. Person after person came up to congratulate them and share how Penny had saved a beloved horse or taught them a new way of understanding these magnificent animals. As the sun set and the party continued by lantern light, Ryland pulled his wife aside for a quiet moment. "Happy?" he asked. "Deliriously," Penny said, leaning into his embrace. "This is everything I never let myself hope for, a partner who respects my work, who wants to build a life together instead of asking me to give up my dreams. I am so grateful you asked to learn from me that day." "Best decision I ever made." Ryland kissed the top of her head. "Well, second best. Asking you to marry me was the first." They spent their wedding night in the farmhouse, in the room that had been Penny's but was now theirs together. And in the morning they woke to begin their new life as partners in every sense of the word. The years that followed were full and rich beyond anything Ryland could have imagined. Together, he and Penny built the horse training business into something truly special. They took on the difficult cases, the horses other trainers had given up on, and turned them into willing, joyful partners for their riders. Word spread, and soon people were coming from multiple counties, even from other parts of California, to have the Lawrences work with their animals. They began holding workshops, teaching other trainers the gentle methods that Samuel Zimmerman had developed and Penny had perfected. Ryland discovered he had a gift for teaching, for translating Penny's intuitive understanding into concepts that other men could grasp and apply. Together they were transforming how people thought about breaking horses, replacing force with partnership. Margaret continued to live in the farmhouse with them, taking care of the household and helping with the business end of things. Patrick grew into a strong young man with his own talent for horses, and eventually took over much of the day-to-day training work, freeing Ryland and Penny to focus on the teaching and the most difficult cases. In the spring of 1880, Penny discovered she was pregnant. The news filled Ryland with a joy so intense it was almost frightening. He had thought he understood happiness, but this was something else entirely, a profound sense of their family expanding and the future opening up before them. Their son was born in December, a healthy baby boy with Ryland's dark hair and Penny's honey-colored eyes. They named him Samuel, after Penny's father, and Ryland held his tiny son with shaking hands and made silent promises to be the best father he could possibly be. Young Sam proved to be as fearless as his mother, toddling into horse pens as soon as he could walk and showing no fear of even the largest animals. Penny taught him from the very beginning to be gentle and patient, and by the time he was 5 years old, he could calm a nervous horse almost as well as his parents. 2 years after Sam's birth, Penny gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. She had her mother's determination and her father's steady temperament, and she adored horses with a passion that delighted everyone. The family grew again 3 years later with another son, Daniel, who proved to be more interested in the business side of things than the actual training, but was invaluable in helping manage their expanding enterprise. Through all of it, the love between Ryland and Penny only deepened. They were partners in the truest sense, supporting each other through challenges, celebrating victories together, navigating the complexities of running a business, and raising children with mutual respect and endless patience. There were hard times, of course, winters when work was scarce and money tight. The year when a fever swept through town and took several people they cared about, though thankfully spared their own family. The inevitable conflicts and disagreements that any married couple faces. But through all of it, they held firm to the principles that had brought them together in the first place: patience, trust, communication, and the willingness to learn and grow together. Just as Penny had taught Ryland to gentle horses through partnership rather than force, they approached their marriage and their family the same way. By the time their 20th wedding anniversary arrived in 1898, Ryland and Penny had become something of a legend in California horse circles. Their methods had spread far beyond Downeyville, adopted by trainers throughout the state and even in other territories. They had trained hundreds of horses, taught dozens of students, and built a legacy that honored Samuel Zimmerman's original vision, while expanding it in ways he probably never imagined. The anniversary celebration was held at the farm, which had grown significantly over the years. The original house had been expanded. The 2 barns were always full of horses in various stages of training, and paddocks spread out in all directions. Sam, now 18, had already begun making a name for himself as a trainer. Rose, at 16, was as skilled as her mother had been at that age. And Daniel, 13, was managing the business accounts with impressive competence. Patrick, who had married a lovely woman named Catherine and moved to a neighboring property, attended with his wife and 3 children. Margaret, now in her 70s but still sharp as ever, presided over the celebration with matriarchal pride. Friends and neighbors, students and clients filled the yard, all there to honor the couple who had changed so many lives, both human and equine. As the sun began to set, Ryland found Penny standing alone by the fence of the round pen where they had spent so many hours working together. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, and she leaned back against him with a contented sigh. 20 years, she said softly. How did that happen? One day at a time, one horse at a time, one moment at a time. Ryland rested his chin on top of her head. Best 20 years of my life. Mine too. She turned in his arms to face him. At 43, she was even more beautiful to him than she had been at 23. Her face showed the lines of laughter and sun. Her hands were rough from years of work, but her eyes still held that same honey gold warmth that had captivated him from the very beginning. Do you remember what you said to me the day we met? That you thought there might be a better way to work with horses? I remember. You were right. And not just about horses. About everything. There was a better way, a gentler way. A way based on partnership and trust instead of force. And you were willing to learn it, willing to change everything you thought you knew. She touched his face tenderly. That is the greatest gift you have ever given me. Not just your love, but your willingness to grow alongside me. You made it easy. You were the best teacher I ever had. He kissed her softly, a kiss that held 20 years of history and the promise of whatever future they had left together. I love you, Penny. Today, tomorrow, always. Always, she agreed. And in the fading light, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, Ryland Lawrence knew he had found exactly what he had been searching for all along. The evening continued with music and dancing, with their children playing and their grandchildren being passed around among adoring relatives. Ryland danced with his wife under the stars, holding her close, and remembering that first evening when he had watched her gentle a wild stallion and thought he had witnessed something miraculous. He had been right. It had been miraculous. But the true miracle was not just her way with horses, it was the way she had gentled his own restless heart, teaching him through patience and trust that he could be more than he had ever imagined. She had shown him that strength came not from domination, but from partnership, not from force, but from understanding. As they turned slowly in the lantern light, with their family and friends around them and the mountains rising dark against the star-filled sky, Ryland sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the day he had asked a remarkable woman to teach him her way. She had taught him about horses, yes, but more importantly, she had taught him about love, about patience, about building something lasting and true. And in learning from her, he had found not just a new way of working with animals, but a new way of moving through the world, gentle, strong, patient, and endlessly capable of growth. Together they had created something beautiful, something that would outlast them both in the students they had taught and the horses they had saved and the children they had raised. As the night deepened and the celebration continued, Ryland held his wife close and knew that he was the luckiest man who had ever lived. 20 years ago, he had been a drifting cowboy looking for something he could not name. Now he was a husband, a father, a teacher, a partner in every sense of the word. And it had all started with a simple question. Would you teach me your way? She had taught him. And in teaching him, she had given him everything he had ever needed. A purpose, a home, a love that would last all of his days. The stars wheeled overhead, the music played on, and Ryland Lawrence danced with his wife and counted himself blessed beyond measure.